Good evening, everyone. We'd like to welcome everyone to our midweek Bible study. We're thankful that God has blessed us with the opportunity once again to come together, study a portion of his holy and divine word. We'll be looking at chapter 2 of our book, Living a Life That Matters. We are in lesson number 2, which is living virtuously. The main text will be coming from Psalms chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. Psalms chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. We will be reading a couple of paragraphs that pertain to our discussion this evening. And then we will be continuing on with our discussion from last week. If you don't have a book, we have some slides that we will be going over to keep everyone on the same page visually and to help move our discussion along. And also for those who are joining on YouTube, you feel free if you have any questions or even a comment to add that into the chat. We are looking at the chat live. So if you have any comment or any question, we will be able to see your comment and or question, and we will be able to reply. And we will be able to include you in the discussion if you would like to be a part of that. All right, let's go to God in prayer, and then we will begin our study. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful and blessed day. We thank you for giving us the opportunity to petition up to you the things in our hearts and our minds. At this time, we are focused on studying a portion of your holy and divine word. We pray that you will bless us, guide, guard, and keep us. Bless our knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of your holy scripture. Help us to capture the meaning of those things in which you would have us to capture today. Bless our walk with you through Christ Jesus, and be with our friends, family, and visitors who are studying with us at this time as well. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, let's look at lesson number 2. And the topic is, as we see on the screen, living virtuously. Let's read Psalms chapter 1, just verses 1 and 2. Psalms 1, 1 and 2. How blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. That's our main passage from Psalms chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. That'll be driving the bulk of our discussion. All right, last week we read the warm-up, the workout, and the cool down. We're just going to recap 2 quick sections, and then we're going to jump right into our discussion. We had a great discussion last week. We ran out of time, so we'll just pick up where we left off as well. In the workout section, our author gave us 3 breakdowns of what you see on your screen from Psalms 1, verses 1 and 2. Basically, we have to be careful where we walk, be careful where we stand, and be careful where we sit. So those are the 3 sections that we have. Be careful where we walk, be careful where we stand, and be careful where we sit, right? Basically, comings and goings. Bad company corrupts good morals. You can quickly become a product of your surroundings or your environment, if I had to summarize as a theme. All right, let's look again at the cool down. Cool down said, blessedness comes when we avoid the counsel of the wicked and meditate on the word of God. When that happens, we are like a tree firmly planted by streams of water. Yet too many Christians plant themselves in a dry land where there is no water. Maybe you have been in the desert. As someone who grew up in Florida and now lives in Washington, I'm used to trees and lots of them. When I go to the desert, it's just weird for me to see no trees. There is simply no nourishment there for them. Don't miss this point. Christians choose where to plant themselves. If you plant yourself in the spiritual desert, you will be like chaff which the wind drives away. Yet, if we choose to plant ourselves by the streams of living water, we will yield our fruit in its season, and our leaf will not wither. And in whatever we do, we will prosper, according to Psalms 1:3. When we choose to live virtuously, Only then can we truly live a life that matters. If you have a book and you're into highlighting things, I would ask that you highlight that on page 15. Don't miss this point. Christians choose where to plant themselves. If you plant yourselves in the spiritual desert, you will be chafed like the wind, which the wind drives away. Yet if you choose to plant yourselves by the streams of living water, we will yield our fruit in its season, and our leaf will not wither. And whatever we do, we will prosper. All right, that's the main discussion point for tonight. Keep in mind that you have a say-so on where you're rooted. We talked about this on Sunday morning. Someone can have control over where your body is physically in a lot of different ways, right? But where your mind is, you have control over that, right? Where you put your mind, where you spend your time emotionally, spiritually, you dictate that. You may not be able to dictate where you spend your time physically. So that's what this is talking about. Spiritually, you decide where you're planted, right? If you put yourself in harm's way, then that will be the fruit that you'll reap. If you put yourself next to the living stream, much like the living water that Jesus was telling the woman at the well, then you can expect to become stronger spiritually. It's going to be hard to be stronger spiritually if you are in a spiritual desert, right? If you put your mind on negative things, it's going to be hard to remain positive. That's just life. You put your mind on positive things, it's going to be much easier to remain and grow more positive, right? That's a paraphrase of it. All right, let's jump in right to our discussion. Last week, we looked at defining the word virtuous. Last week, we did research to find other passages that admonishes us to avoid evil influences. This week, we're going to look at peer pressure. Is peer pressure a phrase only applicable to teenagers? Why or why not? What is peer pressure? So feel free to look at a definition or define it yourself. But first, we should decide what peer pressure is. And then we need to see, is this only applicable to teenagers or is it applicable to adults? Why or why not? What is peer pressure? And is it only applicable to teenagers? Or is it also applicable to adults? Why or why not? So we'll start off with what is peer pressure? Definition wise is influence from members of one peer group. Influence from members of one's peer group. That's a generic definition. But you can define it how you see fit. So first, let's start off with a definition. What is peer pressure, and is it limited to teenagers or are more age groups impacted or involved by peer pressure? What is peer pressure, and is it only limited to teenagers? And while you're thinking about that, last week we looked at several of these already, but this avoiding bad company, think of Ephesians 5:11, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. This is all just to jog our memories to really answer this peer pressure question. 1 Corinthians 15:33, do not be deceived. Bad company ruins or corrupts good morals. We quoted that a lot last week. John 14:6, Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That goes to the cool down section, right? You have to put yourself where Jesus is, right? You have to put your mind onto higher things. Revelations 21:8, but as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, sexual immorals, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portions will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. Again, company you keep, right? You know, there is a famous phrase, you are the company you keep. I'll read two more and then we'll go to our questions. Galatians 6:1, brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted, right? Again, that's the company you keep on the positive side. Look out for one another, right? Help one another spiritually as you see, but also keep watch out for your own spiritual well-being. Then Matthew 7:1, judge not that you be not judged. All right. Sister Karen, why don't you start us off? What is peer pressure, and is it only limited to teenage age group?
Hi, good evening. So peer pressure is the stress that you feel with a group of people trying to doing things a certain way, and you feel like you need to do it their way, even when you have different values, you may have different opinion, you may not want to do it the way how they do it, but because the majority is doing it, so basically, the saying, the majority rule, you feel like you need to do it. So that's peer pressure. So somebody may not be forcing you or telling you or influencing you or trying to convince you to do what they're doing, but you feel the need to do it because so many other people are doing it. It's like a trend. It's like this is the norm. It's like the norm. But at the end of the day, nobody defines a norm because everyone has a different norm. And so peer pressure can be forced on you. Peer pressure can be implied. Peer pressure can be you feel the need, you feel left out, like you feel the need to do it. And what was the other part of the question?
Is it only limited to teenagers or are there
No,
age
it's
groups
not
impacted?
limited. It affects everyone. It affects every single person because adults also have peer pressure. Old people, young people, male, female. It's not limited to anyone.
Good. I was thinking of while sister was reading, I was just reminded of John 8:32. You will know the truth will set you free, right? Think of that in parallel to what she's saying, because she's saying your surroundings, it may not verbally, sometimes she said it may not verbally be trying to force you, but you may be influenced or feel like you're being forced by your surrounding. And Jesus coming with John 8:32 saying, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. That means you have to hold on to that truth in every surrounding or situation you find yourself in. If you let go of that truth, you won't be free. Then you will be a victim of your surroundings in the way that she was explaining. So keep in mind, she was making the point, you may be highly influenced non-verbally or verbally. Someone may pressure you verbally, or your surroundings may pressure you non-verbally, meaning someone may not tell you, hey, let's do this, but everyone else is doing it, so you feel the pressure to do it. Or sometimes someone may say, hey, let's do this, and pressure you to do it verbally. So good. And then she also said it's not limited to teenagers, adults as well, right? This is not just a younger person problem and you grow out of it, right? This is people have been swayed from society, local, domestic, international, small, all the way to large groups, right? Based off of what everyone else was doing. All right, Brother Stanley, why don't you take us to the next point as well?
It can come in the form of co-workers, family, friends. Um, uh, Probably I would also say, on the education level too, because it's a group. It's a group that you bond with. It's a group that you hang around with, and you start saying and doing things, or feel as though you're ostracized not to do that particular thing or the way something is being done. So it could be in those other forms also.
Good. So from a group standpoint, right? I'm thinking, and sadly, I won't mention, the specifics, but I'm thinking of like different times in human history, our modern history, really within the 1900s to 2000, where we've seen war in a group. I'm talking about a large group of people swayed away even by one person. Like we probably can think of more than one example of that in just our or the generation before our lifetime, right? And then individually, it could be one other person, you and someone else. So peer pressure could come in a lot of forms, right? It could be a group of people, like your neighborhood, your local, your country, right? Your generation, right? The society you're in swaying you, or it could be somebody across the street, somebody on your timeline, somebody sitting right next to you, right? So you got to keep vigilant because yes, our enemy is not of this world, right? We're fighting a spiritual battle, but unfortunately, that spiritual warfare can manifest itself in physical, right? Where the devil can get into people, so to speak, right? And then people's sinful decisions can negatively impact your decisions, and then you can be pressured into doing God only knows what. And again, it can be an individual level, or it can be a huge level that will impact you from a group standpoint. Good. All right. Anything else for peer pressure? What is peer pressure? Is it only applicable to teenagers? Why or why not? Sister Donna, go ahead.
Yeah, so, I have a couple examples, but one in particular, peer pressure. So, Brother Stanley, the senior, mentioned peer pressure coming in many forms. And I immediately thought about someone that I used to work with. Actually, it was my boss. It was my boss that I used to work with. And I can remember it was her and another group of individuals that were also kind of like in leadership roles as well, but really trying to put the pressure on me to do something that they were doing or they thought was fun or funny. I didn't think it was fun. I didn't think it was funny. So I know that peer pressure comes in different forms, and adults can be just as bad as teenagers, if not worse, right? When it comes to that. And then when I think about that, and this was my reporting structure. So I also think about instances where we've seen in the news, in the media, right, where peer pressure has been put on employees by their boss, right? And so it does come in many different forms. And if you're not really rooted and grounded, and even if you are, sometimes you may give into that peer pressure. So it's one of those things you really have to know who you are and stand firm. And, needless to say, I actually decided that I could not be managed on that level by this person. And then I transitioned out to another department. But, it's really real. And there are really evil people out there that try to influence you to do things. And I just was like, I have to get out of here. I was like, God, get me out of here. Because these people really have lost their mind. But and they were relentless. And so when I see that peer pressure, especially for young people and women, being reporting to someone that is either going to determine, or they think they're going to determine your path if you don't do a certain thing. But of course, with God, we know that that's not true. For those of us that are Christians, we know that God orders our steps, right? But it is definitely out there. And my experience with it on that particular occasion, it was it really did show me who these people were. Like, this was a job, it was work, but it was everything about it, and their behavior was really ugly. It was really ugly.
Yeah, and I would say I like that the author is asking us if it's just for teenagers, because I would say the social piece, right? The anxiety piece of fear of missing out or wanting to fit in, it doesn't go away when you become an adult. And that peer pressure in the workplace, or especially in your social circle, can have you doing trivial things that you wouldn't normally do, or moral character things that you are conflicted in, right? Especially if it's a superior at work, because your fear of losing your job may have you doing things that go against your integrity, right? It could be as simple as someone saying, hey, let's do this, and it's a lie, right? We're going to get into that in a second with question 4, right? Someone saying, this, who cares, right? Who will see it, right? Well, we know God sits high and looks low, right? God sees all, right? We have to give an account, the Bible says, of all that we say or do, right? These are things that a spiritual person is focused on. Worldly, not that much. What's the big deal? Or it could be bigger things, right? Where integrity is coming in, right? What if your job is going down a pathway that you know is wrong? What will you do? Will you turn a blind eye, or would you say something, or would you quit? Right? These are real questions that are not just teenagers in a classroom or outsider and extracurricular activities, right? These scenarios and others impact us as adults. So definitely don't minimize this to say, man, this is just something that people grow out of. You can be pressured in relationship to do things you would never do. You could be pressured at work, friend group, as well as society. All right, we have some more hands. Brother Kirk, why don't you take us to the next one?
believe in. So peer pressure, like, you know, I think all the points that we just made are valid, so I'm not gonna like belabor it. But I'd also talk about, like, you know, the word that Sister Donna used was influence, and it makes me think about social media and this concept of influencers, right? Like, that in essence is like, I think today that's the peer pressure of society, right? Like, we look at what's happening, like, on our phones with everyone else, what everyone else is doing, what everyone else is saying, what everyone else is wearing, the different challenges that people are doing, to draw attention to themselves, whether it's dances or trends, what's trending, you know, and that's peer pressure. Like, that's a literal practical example of, like, day to day subtly where we're under influence of something that's not godly. And, you know, again, it's just really things for us to think about in terms of, like, who who are we really? You know, and I think we live in a world and society today where, you know, people aren't stripping themselves down to, like, who they are, because they're influenced by so much noise, like, in the media, whether social or, you know, the news and things like that. So you couple that with work and work culture, hustle culture, you know, just grind culture and not being able to live a balanced life. You know, you have a lot of people that um, don't have an identity for themselves because of peer pressure and social influence.
Yeah, this one is something that definitely does not only impact teenagers, right? The visual aspect, right? We've turned into a very highly visual culture from a societal standpoint, right? We have to now speak macro because the internet is global, right? We can be connected with someone on the other side of the world. So Brother Kirk's point now is, let's look at this, right? From a device standpoint, the internet, we can go through all the positives that the internet gives. But his point is, look at the reality. When something is lit up in your hand, naturally your eyes will go to it, right? And how much time do you spend looking at that device? Now, what are you looking at on that device, right? And how is what you're looking at impacting you subtly? How you spend your money, how you vacation or how often you vacation, right? Do you see yourself looking to go on a vacation because you want to go on a vacation, or because somebody else that you know posted a vacation, right? You get to the point where people will go to a vacation, purchase X amount of clothes, right? Let's say swimwear, take multiple photos during that vacation. This is why they have multiple pieces of swimwear, and post all year to make it look like what? They stay on vacation. See? So what happens is the masses get influenced by a lie. See? And now you trying to keep up with someone who really only went on one vacation, but they posted to make it look like they went on 30 vacations. You see? And now we spending all our money to keep up with someone who's in the house. These things don't just impact kids, right? Like, that's a small example, but it impacts a lot of adults. And then you start going to think of physical from a body standpoint, male and female, right? Think of body shaming or dysphoria, or just the complexity of how the human mind from a child to an adult is being shaped by things that aren't true visibly. How does that impact your self-value? How does that impact dating? How does that impact relationships, right? Think of these things, these people who are, you know, spending all wakening time on, you know, financial advice or self-help or, you know, physical training or, you know, any of these things. People who go get surgeries, but they're posting that they work out every day. So you doing the same workout they're doing, buying their workouts, thinking your body will look like their body, but they purchased their body. You trying to work based off of what you purchased from them, but it's not real. See, these are things that unfortunately are specific to the time we live in. And again, these are just some quick examples. You can give so many, so many, right? Think of the spiritual confusion that exists on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, just based off of people pretending to know or deliver a message and people being swayed to and from. Think of political confusion and on and on and on, right? Good. Okay, Sister Karen.
Yes, as you were all talking, I was just thinking of just in general peer pressure, that there are two different sides of peer pressure, because there's the positive side and there's a negative side. Because I remember we had a foster child who felt like she had to get baptized because everyone was baptized. And she felt like I had to get baptized because she felt pressure to do it because everyone else around her were baptized. So that's the positive side. And then there's a negative side. I remember COVID was killing thousands and thousands of people, 2020, 2021, 2019. And I wear a mask today still, every day, because I have underlying conditions and I do not want to catch COVID and I do not want to catch anything else. And I found out that my mask actually helps me with my allergens in the spring and helps me from catching the cold and all other airborne viruses and illnesses. And I remember being pressured by people. I have been looked at like I'm an alien. I have been asked outright, what's up with the mask? And I'm like, I thought COVID still existed, but nobody else is wearing a mask. Why do you have to wear a mask? And this happens to me on a regular basis. So what I'm saying is that it's really interesting how peer pressure is, because they think because everyone else is not wearing a mask, I should not. Why should I be the outlier? But they don't have. Do you have the same condition I have? Have you had COVID? You know what I mean? So it's like, it's a personal decision. So it can be both ways. It can be positive. We tend to look at the negative aspect of peer pressure and being influential, but there's also the very positive side.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, hopefully the positives we're speaking to, or you can see the value, right? Especially friends and family who are joining us, the value of a discussion like this, right? Like this on the flip side, right? Because Proverbs 27 talks about this. We won't read all of it, but 17 through 21 is in context. But the New King James says, as iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend, right? And then we were reading earlier, Galatians 6:1, brother, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted, right? So if 1 Corinthians 15:33 says bad company corrupts or ruins good morals, the flip side of that is a positive, right? And that's church, because you can't go through Christianity all alone. So you have to be influenced, right? Is more of what Sister Karen is saying. And God said the same. You're either a slave to righteousness or a slave to sin. Her point is, which will you be influenced by? Will you be influenced by negative things? And this goes to what the author was saying in the cool down. Will you put yourself in negative situations, but expect a positive spiritual result? Or would you be impacted by positive things and you put yourself more time than not in the positive situation so you can have positive spiritual results? Because the author said that part is up to you. Again, physically, you have no control. Someone can put you physically in a bad way, but emotionally and spiritually, where is your mind? See? And then that impact, even health, right? That's one of the downsides I see since 2020, where there was a line in times past, right? This is how I know every generation is not just a carbon copy, because there used to be a line, but now people are even joking or belittling or fighting over health things, not religious things, not political things, but health. And see, that's when I know, when I started to see society start to disregard women, children, and health on a much larger vocal basis, I know it's just not like, oh, okay, every generation is just the same and things not getting better, is getting worse. Because once you take a regard out in those categories, anyone is liable to do anything to anyone else. And that's a dangerous place to exist in. So her point is true, even from a health standpoint. You can't even mind your own business, right? Without someone else having something to say with what you are doing for your health. Think about how preposterous that is. Again, you can't even mind your own business without someone else worrying about what you are doing, not what they're doing, for your own health, not their health. How? Like, that's the society, unfortunately, we live in. Now, if we replace that or limit that and fill our time with being around spiritual minded, then iron sharpens iron or steel sharpens steel, right? If I can put myself in rooms where I'm not the smartest in the room, my intellect will increase. See that the world thinks that from a business standpoint. Hey, I got to put myself in different rooms. Once I outgrow a room, I have to put myself in a different room so I can continue to grow. That's the same thing spiritually. We already said a couple of weeks ago that work and school takes the majority of our actual hours. We already realized that. So if I throw away my other non-worker, non-school hours, then I just gave my 24 hours to the majority, if not all, of physical things. So where is my spiritual growth? I'm going to have to stop doing some things physically to grow spiritually. That's just the way it is. So these are all good points, good discussions. Thanks for everyone, starting us off with this. Now, most of you were already alluding to this question 4. What is spiritual desensitization? And Brother Stanley spent a good time on this last week as well. So we'll give time to discuss this if you have any additional points. How have you seen this happen in our culture? Now, this was the section that Brother Stanley read last week, where the author was talking about the movie Forrest Gump. And this was just the author's example. You can, substitute that movie or video game or whatever, and then input whatever you feel. So desensitization, which we'll just give from a specific to spiritual in a second, but we'll do generic first. To make a sensitized or hypersensitive individual insensitive or non-reactive to a sensitizing agent, that's the first one. To make emotionally insensitive or callous, to extinguish an emotional response as of fear, anxiety, or guilt, to stimuli that formerly induced it, right? Or desensitization is a psychological process that reduces emotional responsiveness to a stimulus after repeated exposure. It can also refer to the elimination of a natural or acquired sensitivity to an external stimulus, such as an allergy, right? Now, you can go into a medical standpoint to make this. Sister Karen was talking about her allergies, right? Some of us struggle with allergies, so this time of the year is difficult, right? If you have something that will make you desensitized to allergies, right? If you take some medication, it will help you, right? Her mask for herself is desensitizing her from allergy, which means what? Her physical body isn't as sensitive to allergies. So try to think of it that way. Now make the application spiritual. What agent do you have to block you from the things that are spiritual? See, because if you look at it from becoming spiritually desensitized, we could have a filter. Some analogies will say like a glasses, like, people will say, I'm going to draw the glasses on you. Or think of it like a mask, but think of something that blocks your senses, like a mask or shades, right? Something over your eyes or something over your nose and mouth, or all of those, right? Could those things be desensitizing you spiritually? Meaning, are there things, point of views, vantage points, things that are blocking you from being sensitive to spiritual things, right? The author last week when we read was talking about movies, that you can watch a movie and society can desensitize you where things that would normally be flagged as spiritually wrong are even completely forgotten or overlooked entirely. That's why he was saying he suggested a movie A, and the person was like, why? Don't you know this scene and this scene and this scene and this scene is in it? And the person was saying, I didn't even think of that when I suggested it to you, right? So something is dulling your senses where you're not as responsive to spiritual things around you. That's this question. right? What is spiritual desensitization? How have you seen this happen in our culture? So let's focus really on that. How have you seen this happen in our culture, right? How has, now think larger, right? Societal, domestic, international, or local, but from a societal standpoint, how has spiritual desensitization happened in our culture? And let me preface, every culture have this. It don't even matter what their collective religious beliefs are, because every human being is created to be spiritual. See? So every culture have this, a time where there's a moral decay, right? Past, present, and future till Christ comes. So you could speak from America's point of view. You could speak from any country's point of view, past or present. All right, Brother Stanley, go ahead.
Examining, my current moral standards in the light of biblical teaching is, I've lived long enough now to come out of a censorship culture to an open mic culture. So I see things on commercials. Sometimes I'll look at Sister standing out and I'll say to her, are they showing that? Like, are they on these certain commercials of underwears and medical devices and stuff? Are they showing that? I remember the time back in the day they wouldn't show that on a commercial following a 2:30, 3 o'clock show in the afternoon when I got home from school. So I went from that culture to a culture where it's open mic. They say things now that they only said on HBO when my kids were small. Now they say those things openly on a half an hour show. Now, as a Christian, I'm only sensitive to those things in moral shows and entertainment. And I have to confess that. I notice when a moral movie or a moral show goes off-centered, I don't notice that in other movies or an R-rated movie or something like that. I'm like the guy, with the base here that he's talking about right here. So what's the big deal? Because in my moral world, those things make sense to me because my guard is dropped. I don't want to hear certain things in my that world that I live in every single day. It don't bother me. I hear it, but it don't bother me. I see it, but it doesn't bother me. And it's not until I bring the spiritual part of that's what I'm saying, examining current moral standards in the light of biblical teaching. My Sundays are very different than my Saturdays and my Mondays. Like I'm very sensitive on Sundays about just about everything. I seem to hear everything. I seem to want to react to everything, even going home from church or coming to church. That doesn't bother me on a Saturday or a Monday. If you could understand the point that I'm trying to make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is important too, right? Because you can also apply that comment. We don't have time, but we can apply that comment to where Paul was talking to his audience in Romans and other places, but where he was talking about the individuals who were arguing over head covering, one instance, arguing over sacrificial meat, another instance, arguing over holidays, a third instance. Why? Because what Brother Stanley is saying, like, let's use the sacrificial meat because hopefully that will offend hardly anyone. To the person that was buying the meat in that market, and again, if you like to study more of this or have questions, just let us know. We'll contact you. But this is all coming from a biblical account. The person who was buying the meat and couldn't care less about idols because they worship God, it didn't impact them. It only impacted them when someone seen what they were doing. See? And then that person went back to the group and said, hey, Ellis is buying meat that was sacrificed to idols. But I said, because it didn't matter to me, but now it mattered to the other person. So age is that way. You might watch a movie, right? But if a kid walked into the room, you might respond differently to the same movie you just were watching. Days of the week work that way. Brother Stanley saying Sunday, he's going to be spiritually heightened on a lot of things. Saturday night, maybe not so much, right? So this is will impact us in different ways. Age will play, right? Because if you're younger in the society that we're all saying, hey, things are changing, you may have a different perspective because you may not remember, like his point, when, right? Some of us on the call can remember when TV went off, right? That's a concept as a phrase. Someone say, what does that mean? There was a time where after a certain time, TV literally went off, not turned the TV off. There was nothing broadcasting. Right. There was a time where salacious and controversial things were only on at a certain time of the night. Brother Stanley is mentioning, right? We're beyond those times now, unfortunately. Right. So now if you see kids talking about a movie, right, some of us will be like, what is it rated? Right. But most of society will be like, I don't know, right? Why does that matter? Because you might come from a time period where the rating of a movie dictated who should be in the theater, but you go to a R movie as an adult and you see kids in the theater, right? I'm confused when I see that because I'm grown twice. I'm wondering how and why are there kids in this movie? See? So if I shouldn't even be in the movie, why are kids in the movie? You see? So these things, again, are generational, meaning the same question will impact us all in different ways, just depending on perspective. All right, Brother Kurt, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think this is interesting because I literally was just talking to my 8-year-old son about this, like right before this call, because we've been having like conversations about what's age appropriate for him to watch. And I was saying to him that, you know, when I was his age, when I was his age, I didn't have access to certain kind of shows because those shows came on at night when I was asleep and it was at bed, and it was like, adult content came on at after like 9 o'clock. You know what I'm saying? And sure, like, yeah, you could try to maybe sneak and try to watch some stuff and things like that. You felt cool if you stayed up after 9, but generally you didn't have access to adult content before a certain time. Mm-hmm. Now with streaming services, like, you can watch anything at any time. Everybody has access to the same thing. And that's not like the way it should be. So I was talking to him about like the ratings, TVMA and TV and like PG-13. I literally was explaining what the letters mean and like what ages like are for what audience and stuff like that. And he asked me a question. He said, so what would happen if there weren't any ratings? He's 8 years old, right? So he's like really thinking about it. And I said, that's a good question. I said, there was a time when there weren't any ratings because people weren't putting certain things on TV.
Sadly, yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I
Yeah.
I said they had to create the ratings because of what was being put out there. So those are the kind of conversations you got to have with kids nowadays because they can literally watch anything. And I said to him, he said, so at what age can I watch like rated R stuff? And I said, 17 and up. And I said, but you have to look at it not like you're missing out, but it's protecting you from things. And that's what I think is the same thing that when we talk about being desensitized, it's, we can't get involved in certain things because it's protecting us from things that we don't need to be exposed to. I said, there are things that are in rated R and TVMA, things that you might see that you don't understand at 8 years old. You know what I'm saying? So that's not for you. And it might ruin like whatever it could be for you in the future. You know what I'm saying? So, there's just certain things that we're not like equipped to handle, and that's hard for adults to hear. But, like, I don't try to watch certain things because certain and again, it ain't even about TV. You think about social media, you have access to anything at your fingertips. Right. So I try not to be on certain pages or like, even sometimes like exercise videos. I like exercise and I like looking up for routines online, but they found a way to sexualize that online too. You know what I'm saying? So it's the subtle things that have you in a hole if you're not careful and mindful, but protecting what you're looking at. You know, but because it's so rampant, we become desensitized to like, this is actually a thing that we shouldn't be doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and this impacts relationships like adults, dating, parenting. Why? Because the world or the masses, right? We say world and spiritual, but let's say for the audience listening, the masses will be doing something that they perceive as normal. See? And as long as you keep interacting with people that think like you are desensitized, right, to a standard. And you also are desensitized or out of your mind of how another person may live. When you interact with somebody more spiritual, see, and you start asking those questions, someone first response is thinking, why he or she so weird, right? But it's because they assume everyone do those things. And see, that is the danger, in my opinion, of where we are right now. Because the assumption is everyone lives like that. And I don't believe that's really the case. So there's a psychological study, Brother Kirk is talking about. I would love if we had time to go down this, because there's a psychological study that was talking about something from a sexual standpoint, right? Because we're adults on this call. Okay. They were saying that a good number of people, right? This means more than the majority, right? More than half makes a majority. When they were doing this study, were saying that they did this thing, right? And I'm purposely telling you sexual so that you can think about in your mind, right? How far you can go into these different directions, because this impacts all aspects of life. And when they were asking them why they had did that once or more than once in their life, they were trying to trace it back to something, right? And what the person, the governing body taking this data found was, it wasn't that any person wanted to do those things or had a desire to do those things. You follow? It was almost like herd immunity. Each person was saying, well, they seen it on this show or they seen it on this website. So the assumption since a kid was everyone did that. See, so then they did that. Drinking is that way. Some people can't stand the taste, but they drink because drinking is a social activity. So therefore you assume everyone drinks. Because if you turn on any advertisement, right, it will look like every human person in the world drinks. See? So some people will say, I honestly don't like the taste of alcohol, but I drink because when I went to college, everyone was drinking. See, like these things can impact you again, child, all the way up to adult. So we got to have these conversations, right? One thing would be, right, we'll just stay with the example Brother Kirk was using. One thing would be how radical you can be from children, especially if you can buy a gift for a child, right? I still believe children should be children. So I buy child gifts for the age appropriate for that child, because I don't believe in children acting, talking, or listening or watching things that adults should be doing. That's just me, because I'm very retro. See? So therefore, if a video game is mature and the kid is 8, like Brother Kirk is saying, I'm not buying them that game. That's Ellis, because it said, to Brother Kirk's point, M on it. See? So why would I buy that child that? Look at some of superhero movies. I'm grown. I don't check the ratings for superhero movies. I just go. But if I was bringing a group of kids and it said PG-13 and they were 11, why would I bring them? See? The movie's PG-13. You need to go to a PG movie or a G movie. You know what's wrong with that? They're going to say, no, that's a cartoon. That's for kids. Okay, well, see? And like, again, at a young mind, If you're not conditioned spiritually at a young mind, like Ecclesiastes is saying, and instead you're conditioned physically, I can ask everyone to come off mute and give their testimony, right? Because we can all say yes. Based off of what you're saying from that study, I can tell you there's things that I still do today, not because I ever wanted to do them. They just became habits because I seen other people doing them, which brings us back to question 3, peer pressure. So I think that those conversations are very important to have in the home. I think they're important to have parents to other parents, kids to other kids, church members to other church members, right? Spiritually minded people to worldly minded people, right? Because those are the conversations that can change the narrative. Or we can just assume everyone's doing it. And that assumption is dangerous. All right, Sister Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, I think our world in general is spiritually desensitized. Why? Because religion has been normalized and commercialized. I mean, everyone has tattoos with crosses. People have scriptures tattooed on their bodies. They have tattoos and scriptures in their houses, in their cars, at their workplaces. They wear clothes with all these words on it. So as far as they're concerned, that's it. They mention, oh, the man up there, give thanks to the man up there, every time I hear it. I was watching this American Idol, and Jelly Roll was mentoring the contestants, and he had a cross on his face. And I said to myself, does he know the significance of that cross? Sometimes I wonder, I was like, why do people have all these crosses on them? Does he even go to church? Does he even worship God? Does he understand the significance of that cross? Why do you have a cross? What does that mean? What does a cross mean? So people are just in general very not sensitive to spiritual things, because they believe that, just look at when people die. Everyone goes to heaven when they die. Everyone. You go to every funeral. There's never been a funeral that I hear that someone didn't go to heaven. Everyone did. So we have made religion and spirituality into what we want it to be. As I said, all normalized, commercialized. It's like it's our normal. It's like, this is what the world does. So because the world does it, this is what it actually is. But the fact is that it's not, and a cross does mean the world to us Christians, because if it wasn't for the cross, we'd not be here. If it wasn't for the cross, we'd not have any hope of salvation. So there's so much more. Everything is so much more deeper, but as I said, it's all, nobody cares, because, I'm free to do whatever I want to do. So, nobody really cares.
Yeah, I think that that's critical too, right? To think about, we can, and this is all tactics, unfortunately, right? This is all spiritual warfare tactics. If you take something that means something and you plaster it everywhere, the meaning is reduced, right? So the cross before Jesus was viewed and used for capital punishment. It would be like somebody walking around with a noose on a necklace or an electric chair on a necklace, right? But Jesus took that negative and brought power to it. Great, right? So we're not minimizing the symbolism. Her question is, because you see it all the time now, all day long, in every different medium, does it still have its impact as the people who are watching Jesus bleed to death on it? No. And then when she was talking, I was thinking of 1 Corinthians chapter 18. 1 Corinthians 18 says, for the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. But to us who are being saved, it is the power of God, right? That summarized what she's saying, because she's saying to us, it's not a joke, but to other people, it could be as fashion, you see? So, those and other verses, just keep in mind. All right, Aldolph family, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what I noticed from being desensitized, I noticed that, the longer you do something, or the longer we're in this world and the world goes around, we become more desensitized. It usually starts from what I see, in the physical, the moral, and then it just keeps going on and on and on into the spiritual. Even I can take an example. Even last week, you know, when we were at the hospital and everything, like, you know, the doctor who's delivered, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of babies before, you know, she's ready to get to it. She's about business. She's not really caring about anything else. She's just trying to, hey, let's get this done. She's rushing. She's just trying to get to it. But us, we're in the moment. We're taking pictures. We're looking at what we need to do. Like we're in it. We're just soaking it up because we're not used to it. We're not doing this every single day, and this is a special moment for us. But for her, like, you could hear it in her tone, even when things got even more serious, and she was delivering some news and kind of, you know, setting up some expectation with us. Even her delivery, you felt there was no I don't want to say compassion, but she was so used to doing it and delivering bad news or the certain messages to people. She was just saying it. And I'm just like, man, like, you're just like that. Like, you know, you're not going to have any type of feeling towards it or kind of feel bad about saying those things the way you're saying it. But once again, she's used to doing it and doing it and doing it. And so it wasn't that big of a deal for her. And I feel like as Christians, sometimes the longer we remain in Christ, the longer we stay as Christians, I think sometimes we can become desensitized as well. And the world around us does a great job of encouraging us to be desensitized because, you know, we're living and we're seeing changes from time to time, and that can impact us, and we can allow the world to influence us. We can allow peer pressure to come in and get involved in our spiritual lives where it gets us to a point of no return. So once again, what I see is from generation to generation, it gets worse and worse. I mean, I can remember growing up in Haiti where I would even look someone who's older in the face. Like, I would even be, if you're an adult, I'm not looking up to you. I'm not talking back. I'm not doing none of that. So I can remember these things. And I remember when I did something wrong, before I got home, there was 5-6 different adults who chastised me and who kind of punished me for the wrong that I was doing. But nowadays, you know, I'd be lucky if one person said, hey, your child's doing this or your child's doing that. So from generation to generation, it gets worse and worse from what I'm seeing. And we get more desensitized from a physical level at first. Then it works its way into the moral, into the emotional, and then eventually the spiritual goes along too.
Yeah, I think one thing would be, because Brother Ricardo's adding, you know, every aspect of life, which is good to look at, right? One thing would be to look at it as simplified as the more you do something, the easier it will be to keep doing it. First time is a shocker, right? 350th time, it's routine, right? And he used example, it could be giving birth, big deal to 2 people, not a big deal on the doctor's side, right? Because it's routine, right? And lifestyle become routine. And that's how you become desensitized. That's why you have to open up the word. You know, the Bible talks about the Bible is double-edged sword, able to separate bone marrow, right? Body, soul, and spirit, mind and body, right? Like you have to keep opening up that word so it can bring you back, right? And bring you back to where you need to be. I'm going to reread this, Psalms 1, 1, and 2, only because the next question is going to touch on this. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, right? So walks in the counsel of ungodly, stands in the path of sinners, or sits in the seat of the scornful. And our question 5 is, what is the significance of the progression of the psalmist using from walking, standing, and sitting? Think of what we just were looking at in questions 3 and 4, peer pressure and spiritual desensitization, right? So what happens is you become desensitized, and therefore you go from walking, progression, standing, right? And then sitting is complacent, right? Just think of it that way. Walking, you're moving, right? You could move away. Standing, you're stuck. Sitting, it's a complete lifestyle at that point. Walking, let's say first time, first couple times. Standing, you're doing it more often. Sitting, you are completely desensitized. You are completely engulfed in this lifestyle. All right, Brother Kurt, why don't you start us off with question 5?
Hey, baby. Yeah. It's interesting because I love how the author has posed this question because, Psalm 1 is one of my favorite passages of scripture, but I've never really thought about it the way that he's posing this question and the progression, right? So I look at it like actually like the literal things, right? So walking, standing, and sitting. So like you can be walking somewhere and not be going the same place with someone, right? So it talks about walks not in the counsel of the ungodly. Now, if you're literally walking with someone, like you can walk, but that person might be going to the left and you might be going to the right. So, there's still a opportunity to, diverge your destination and your direction. Then you go to stand, and like now I think I envision like maybe standing out, like you're walking together, and then maybe you've come to this person, the person you're walking with destination has come before yours, and or vice versa. And now you're standing together. Now you're a little bit more comfortable because now you're standing, you're chopping it up a little bit. You know what I'm saying? And then lastly, you're sitting like now, like you said, now you're just comfortable. Now this is your friend. This is your person. You're someone that you're communing with, and I just, like I said, I've never really like looked at it as a progression in regards to how someone can really kind of fall into these kind of things, you know what I'm saying? But I can see how it stages and how a person can subtly start one way on one track and then end up in a completely different place.
Yeah, I think the walking with someone is a good analogy. So let's stay there, right? Because visual, right? So if you're walking with someone, Brother Kirk's right. I can be influenced, but not that much, right? Because I could go another way, they go another way. I could be influenced by the conversation they're having. I may overhear it, conversation they're having with me, what they look like, but I'm walking, right? I can't determine who walks near me, right? We don't have that luxury in life, right? So walking is in the world, but not of it to me, right? Now I got to pick where I'm walking because the next one is a path. See how it says stands in the path of a sinner? I like when Brother Kirk was saying, let's say the person is stopping before I'm stopping, but I never reach my destination because I stopped walking. Now I'm standing in a path. It's a difference between walking on a path and standing on it, because I might walk on the path of destruction here or there, but I like to hope that I'm standing on the path of righteousness more times than not. If I start standing on the path of destruction, Jesus already warned me where that path will end. And once I stand long enough, this is just humanity, I'm going to take a seat. And when you want to sit down, if your legs get weak enough, you'll even sit on the floor. You're not going to wait for a chair. So some people are seated on the path of destruction. And you sit down somewhere long enough, you start to grow roots like a tree, right? And now you shall not be moved. See, you're stuck. And look at the stuck, scornful, right? Who would want to be stuck on the seat of the scornful? Sounds like chaos. See? So look at how the progression of the environment goes in this verse. First, they're ungodly, then they're sinners, and then they're scornful. See? Ungodly, godly, ungodly, I don't know. Don't sound that bad. Sinners, sinner, don't sin, you do sin, I don't know. Scornful, though, is outside of spiritual, meaning you could talk to anyone on your timeline and they'll, scornful, no, that sounds bad. See? Like you be hard pressed to find someone say, nothing wrong with scornful. So look at the progression is getting worse. The company that you're keeping from walking to standing to sitting is getting worse. Right. So I also like the way this author put that, because he's trying to show the progression of how a mistake will become a routine, will become a habit, will become a lifestyle. And that question is 5 is a question you got to wrestle with yourself, right? You have to think more so that way. All right, let's go to question 6. Have you ever watched a movie on your own, then shared it with someone else and noticed things you did not first time view it? Why is that? We talked about that when Brother Stanley read. If you have anything, you can feel free to raise your hand. But last week, we spent a good amount of time not only looking at that movie, but we were looking at different movies in general. So what I'll do is I'll open up questions 6 and 7 just to end the class. Feel free. If you have something for 6, by no means feel you don't have feel you're stifling, you give your update. But I'll also read 7. Christians choose where to plant themselves. This is coming from the cool down. Don't miss this point. Page 15. Christians choose where to plant themselves. If you plant yourself in a spiritual desert, you will be like chaff which the wind drives away. Yet if we choose to plant ourselves by the streams of living water, we shall yield our fruit in its season, and our leaf will not wither. And in whatever we do, we will prosper. What does this mean? Christians choose where to plant themselves. Yes, Brother Stanley, go ahead.
I have to go back, because sometimes when we're talking and we're personally relating our individual stories and experiences, we have a tendency sometimes to miss the root of what the author is trying to get us to see virtuously. It says, do not, walk, do not stand. When you go back to the content of the book itself, you gotta watch where you go, who you hang around with, and who you sit amongst, because it's going to take you out of what you know to be right and wrong. So tonight we talked about that whole peer pressure thing, you know what I'm saying? So it's leaving us with the mindset that we always have to be on guard, and we can't let what's going on around us dictate what we know to be true. So the author is building, he built us up to come to this questionnaire of, there are some things that are important, there are some things that are not, and then there are some things that you have to guard your perimeter, because everything that you see and hear may not be good for you as an individual. Like Sister Stanley said, she had to get out of there, because there are some things, there's some groups, there's some cliques, there's some, folks that they're comfortable in that setting. That's what they do. They go out, they drink together, they picnic together, they go over each other's houses, and that's who they are. You can't stop people from being who they are, but that doesn't mean that you have to get sucked into that environment when you know that environment is going to make you uncomfortable to the morality that you base your moral compass on. See, that's what it's all about. I have a compass that's taking me on this straight and narrow path. I got to be very careful, because there are some things that I really want to do that I can't do anymore on this road, because if I do, it's going to take me off of this road. See, that's the Christianity effect. I don't want to go back to what I used to be, because when I was there, I wasn't happy. So in order to maintain my happiness and my virtuous lifestyle, I have to guard myself from things, people, groups that's going to draw me back into what I used to be and used to do. And I don't want to lose my momentum and, 1 step forward, 2 step back.
I think of 1 Peter 5:8 when Brother Stanley is talking. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. 2 scenarios from 2 biblical accounts, I'll say. Better way to put it, from the Bible, I think about from the comments Brother Stanley was making. One is prodigal son. right? There's a phrase that the streets aren't for everybody. That's why they made sidewalks. You know who understood that? The prodigal son, because he started to play with fire. He went to a lifestyle that he was not familiar with because he was a homebody. And see, homebodies who want to be out in the mix get devoured. The city devoured those people. Like if you move to a city and you from a small town and you know in your heart you a homebody and you try to be in the mix, it won't take not even 4 Saturdays. You be caught up quick because you're not used to that. You know another story that's just like that? Samson. Samson's whole childhood was even set apart from his Jewish society, but he was trying to act cute with people who were built different. Delilah was built different. She was not playing a game, but Samson thought she was playing. See? And when you think somebody playing and they're not playing, you end up blind in a pit because Delilah was dead serious. And a lot of times we get devoured like that, even by people. We start playing around with somebody who know the game. They're not playing, see? And you are ill-equipped for the lifestyle that you trying to flirt around with. Devoured. Samson is a good example. Devoured. Prodigal son, devoured. Where did that leave the prodigal son? Sitting with pigs. That's his fault. He was playing around with a lifestyle he knew in his heart he was not familiar with. That means he wasn't built like that. He needed to be at home doing what his father asked him to do, like his brother, because that's all he knew. Samson needed to be at home doing what God asked his parents to ask him to do. But instead, think about Samson and Delilah. He was playing around. He kept taunting the Philistines and taunting them. See, he kept playing around. It was a joke until it wasn't a joke. And when he woke up and didn't have his strength, he realized when it was too late that this is not funny. Keep in mind, God in heaven, none of his prancing around was funny though, but not even to his parents, but it was funny to Samson. See, we end up like that. That's a very practical story where we keep playing and playing and playing. You poke a tiger with a stake, you are going to get bit. You can't tell people nothing, right? People going to hear that, be like, no, that's your life. That's not my life. Okay, go ahead then. Because sometimes you are trying to flirt around with activities that you are ill-equipped. Some people have been sinning a long time in that area. See, they're very equipped to handle those situations. Some people are wolves and sharks. And here you come as a little lamb or a little billy goat, and you prancing around among wolves. Like Samson was strong, but he was like a baby lamb compared to Delilah. Delilah was like a pack of wolves in one person. See, he was ill-equipped to play that game. That was a game to him. Go read Samson. He kept doing things that was funny, right? It wasn't funny though. It wasn't funny to Delilah. And that's where we got to make sure we don't go down that rabbit hole. That from what Brother Stanley is saying, oh, yeah, wait a minute. I got to stop playing around because the devil's not playing around. That's why I read that verse first. He's not playing around, but you keep trying to play around, keep knocking on the door. Sooner or later, the devil going to answer. These are phrases that people have been saying for thousands of years. Why? Because they know you need to pause playing around in spiritual settings. See? So application wise, that comment is definitely to you as an individual, right? We made comments throughout the night about, speaking on societal and things, but that comment is to you. You got to make sure you don't play around because some people aren't playing and our souls are at risk here, right? So we got to be more mindful. All right, Brother Kurt, why don't you close this out?
Yeah, I'll close by saying this, even to the story of Samson and the prodigal son. I was actually reading up on Samson a few weeks ago. They both are examples of also being where you're not supposed to be. So when this question talks about Christians choose where to plant themselves, like we have to be mindful and careful of where we are and where we find ourselves, because you're right. Like, it's some people that this all they know, that world, that darkness is all they know. And I know as Christians, we're supposed to let our light shine, and we're supposed to, save the lost at all cost and go into the darkness and all that, but listen, you can't tell me that I haven't seen it where, like, if you're going to a bar with some friends to try to convert them and having a couple drinks to convert them, that person's going to end up a Christian. I've never seen it. I see people end up at the bar and more instead of church, right? Like, because that's like, if you're the only person in that scenario, you end up becoming more influenced than vice versa. It's very rare that it's the other way around. So we have to be careful where we are. We have to be careful who we are around. You mentioned Delilah. We have to be around, I feel like light bearers, because iron sharpens iron. And so we have to be careful where we plant ourselves. And the last thing I'll say is, this discussion makes me think about Matthew 5. I want to say maybe 18, around that area, where Jesus is talking about, like, if you're 27 and on, when he talks about, if you look at a woman and lust after her, you commit adultery, and if your right eye offends you, pluck it out and cast it from thee, for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not thy whole body should be cast into hell. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee, for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not thy whole body. So we have to be willing to, like, some people might think he's not talking literal, but, like, we have to think about it that way, right? Like, if something is detracting you from your light shining, and in another gospel, Luke, he talks about the light in you being dark, you got to make some drastic changes and measures. Maybe it's not plucking out your eye, maybe it's getting off social media, maybe it's getting off the internet, maybe it's not watching TV, right? But there are drastic measures that you have to take to keep the light, because there's so much influence out there.
Yeah, I mean, think of something, one of the examples that someone raised tonight, right? Sister Stanley was talking about work, because all money isn't good money. Are we willing to leave a job, right? That's like cutting a limb off, right? Like someone would say, what? No, I gotta live. Why would I quit? Well, okay, well, and then what will that job continue to do to you? So that point is, again, another personal point. You have to internalize that. Are there things you would actually stop doing or give up doing for your spiritual well-being, right? Things, like actual things. What if it's a person? Would you remove someone from your life? Like, these are real questions. And then the first part of what Brother Kirk was saying, immediately I was thinking of Acts 21. We don't have time to read this whole chapter. I wish, though, after that comment. But in Acts chapter 21 and verse 4, it says, finding disciples, we stayed there 7 days. They told Paul through the Spirit not to go up to Jerusalem. Now, this is a man of God, but he didn't listen. So just keep in mind what Brother Kirk was saying, being in places you shouldn't be. His example was a bar, right? Acts 21 is a temple. So Paul goes anyway, right? And if you skip down, again, we don't have time, but please read chapter 21 if you can when we dismiss. When he skips down, verse 27, 7 days were almost ended. The Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, men of Israel, help. This is the man who teaches all men everywhere against the people the law in this place. And furthermore, he also brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place, for they had previously seen Trophimus, the Ephesian, with him in the city, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. And all the city was disturbed. And the people ran together, seized Paul, dragged him out of the temple, and immediately shut the doors. But in verse 4, the Spirit told people to tell him, don't go there. And he went anyway. Because if you poke a tiger with a stake, you're going to get bit. If you walk into their temple teaching and preaching something else, they are going to lay hands on you. Yeah. If people are drunk having a good time and you trying to tell them about something spiritual, you can't be surprised if someone throws something at you, because look at your setting. If you put yourself in harm's way in a relationship you know you're ill-equipped to be in, Samson, you can't be surprised when you wake up blind. Because you put yourself, question 7, the flip side, in the wrong side. You put yourself in the desert spiritually. You didn't put yourself with the living water. So we hope something was said, or multiple things. We shouldn't reduce it to one thing at tonight, because everyone had great comments. Hopefully there's been at least multiple things said that you can latch onto, whether a larger or specific to your life. There was a lot of examples given. This second chapter is living virtuously. The overall theme, like Brother Stanley was reminding us, is living a life that matters. So each chapter is trying to get us more equipped to live a life that matters. This second lesson last week and this week was living virtuously. So we pray that you've picked up some tools along the way, hopefully, that will assist you in your daily, right? We mentioned this in the last chapter, but we want to think each Wednesday in this book daily, not when you get a chance, not weekly, monthly, yearly, throughout your whole life. Daily. Can you make a daily sacrifice to do things that will help you live a life that matters, right? That's what you have to ask yourself. All right, Sister Donna, I think I seen your hand. Did you have something?
I actually was just going to say, I'm reminded of Romans 12:2, which is when the scripture says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and by the that you may prove what is good and acceptable and the perfect will of God. And I think that's what it all boils down to when we talk about where Christians choose to plant themselves. And I'm thankful that God has given us a free will, right? Because I get to decide. I get to decide as a Christian in my life now. Now, I'm not saying that everyone in their life may have had an opportunity to decide things that have happened to them along the way. I'm saying now, when we become adults, no matter where we are, you could be in bondage or not, but you can decide how you're going to live your life, meaning you can decide where you're going to plant yourself so that you can flourish and not be conformed to those around you and the world around you and the evilness. And yes, removing yourself. I've had to remove myself from people, from places, from things, right? Because I know that spiritually for me, it wasn't good. And I didn't want to be in those places and have lived that kind of lifestyle anyway. But just knowing that God has given me an opportunity to choose, that I can choose some things, and I prefer to choose where I plant myself, and then going back to knowing that I have to renew my mind because I want to be transformed, not conform to the things of this world.
Yeah, I mean, these things, these comments, right? If you take all of them and bundle them together, they're not easy, but they are what will keep our souls safe, right? Like, they're not easy, right? We don't want anyone, as we go through this book, we'll keep repeating this chapter to chapter. We're not minimizing how difficult every day is. It's very hard to live in this world, but we weren't designed to live how most people are living. That's what we're saying. We were designed in God's image, whether you believe that or not is true. So these classes are to help us live a life that matters and not just live a life, right? Like, we got to live a life that matters. So if you've been visiting with us, especially in the last 2 chapters, we've been covering a lot of ground. We had started this in the last chapter. We'll repeat it. If you would like a deeper Bible study, tonight we alluded to some biblical references that we didn't have time to read fully. If you want a greater discussion, if you feel like a breakout session would benefit you or your family, please let us know, whether that will be us as members here or friends and family who are watching. Our contact information is in the description. We encourage you to contact us for a more deep dive Bible study. We would love to keep talking about this chapter individually with you, as collectively next week we move to chapter 3. We want to thank everyone for their attention, their participation. We thank you for setting the time aside to study tonight with us. We ask that God will bless, guide, and keep you. And at this time, we'll end our live stream, and we pray that you have a blessed remainder of your evening. All right, for the saints,